Alright, I'm on. Let me know if you can hear me. I was using the wrong stream key wasn't updated or... Yeah, it should be capturing sound now, hopefully. Alright. It's always fun doing a live lecture, so sorry. Keep getting distracted. Alright, let's see. So tonight we are, let me get my other screen up over here. I had to move some things around to make everything work properly. For some reason it wasn't capturing my computer screen, but it was capturing my secondary screen. Alright. That should be muted. Okay, so it's echoing. Let's see. Let me see if I can change some of my settings on my... Oh, yeah. Let me change that. Alright, so I'm changing my settings on my headset. Let me know if that sounds a little better. If not, I might have to delete one of the inputs on my OBS. Yeah, that might be actually what I need to do. Does that sound better, Ma? Let me know if I'm saying that right, Mabe. Still echoing. Okay. I'm going to turn off the live real... Oh, cool. Cool. I'm glad I got that right. Okay, I'm going to turn off the live stream real quick to change my settings. Unless, I don't think I can do that now. Oh, wait, I don't have to. Okay. How's that sound? I just deleted one of the inputs. Sounds okay? Oh, good. Okay, so I think it's because it was capturing my computer audio as well. So now we're good. Yay! All right. So tonight we're going to be going over the graph editor. And we've looked over the graph editor a bit in week 1. Also, if you have any questions as I go throughout, I do have my chat open on my screen as well, so I can answer anything that you have as we go. And tonight I'm just going to go over a few tools to help you and make them very clear for you, so when you are working in the graph editor, it's just easier for you. My cat is being a pain right now, and I apologize. Hopefully she lays down soon. Okay, so having this information within the slide form will be a great reminder for you to look back on as well. And the Maya help docs, let me see if I can get that up real quick. If you just go to, yep, we already have Google up, so I'll just go Maya help docs. And then you can find it. Usually it comes up at the very beginning, but this is actually a great way to learn about the graph editor even more. They have great visuals and examples to help with anything that you're not clear on, or if you can't quite remember where to find the item within the graph editor. So if you run a search within the help docs, it's typically fairly easy to find the information you need. So just right here in this top toolbar, you could type in, let's say, we'll just say graph editor. And I mean, you can look at wherever you need to go. If there's a certain tool that you're trying to find, you can usually search it and it'll give you the information that you need. So if I went over something and you can kind of remember what it is, but you couldn't quite find it or remember where it is, then you can just search it in the toolbar and you should be able to find it. So this is I pulled a lot of information from here actually that we're going to go over tonight. So you can see, like, they even have examples and they're animated examples. They can be really helpful. So even when you're going into your other classes, if there's something that somebody covered and you don't quite understand, like the concept, or you want to learn more about it, definitely try out the Maya docs and you'll find a lot of helpful information. So as you get into more complicated animations, or even now, it's going to be incredibly helpful if you're comfortable working within the graph editor. You can make tweaks and easily see how it's affecting your animation instead of messing up your animation within the already set keys, to see how you can make the animation work better if something feels snappy or off. You can quickly clean up and edit keys within the graph editor to make your animation work better. And if you do these edits and it still doesn't feel quite right, you can easily undo those edits because you're usually working with multiple keys that you're changing at once. So I encourage you to try and use the graph editor, and the more you work with the graph editor, the more comfortable it will become for you to use it as a tool. So let's do a review of the graph editor before we dive into new information. We know that we can find the graph editor under Windows, Animation Editor's Graph Editor. We know that when we're editing animation curves in the graph editor, we're looking at time versus value. Timing would be the speed of an action. Value would be where in X, Y, and or Z space the action is happening. We know the quick keys for keying, and so translates would be Shift plus W, rotates Shift plus E, and in scales would be Shift plus R. As you get more into the graph editor, you'll see that the less keys that you add, the less keys you need to clean up. So if you really think about what you're trying to do within the animation or the action you're trying to accomplish, the hotkeys will help you. Now, with that being said, you're currently working on walk cycles. You'll need to key every pose I go over within your walk cycle playlist and within the run cycle lecture. Don't try to key less than the poses that you need for your cycles. I'm giving you a full blueprint of what's needed, and you'll be graded on those specific items. However, when you start creating your own animations past these cycles, if you begin to work in the graph editor, you'll want to think about whether the keys you're adding serve a purpose. So we learned about the graph editor tangents, and we kind of saw where you would use these within your animations and how they would help your animation. We're using clamped for our walk cycle. We even went over how to break some tangents within our graph editor lectures. So now this is where the new information comes in. These are the graph editor tools that I'm going to go over, and I separated these within 2 slides, and we'll look at each of these within the Maya file I have. So remember, I have these listed out just so you can look back at this later, and if you can't quite remember what those hotkeys are for, or what the hotkeys are for those tools, then you have them here, but you can also look them up within Maya help docs. So the first one we have is pan in the graph editor, which is Alt middle mouse button drag. Then we have zoom in the graph editor, which is Alt plus right click drag. We have zoom in on a curve, which is you select either your curve or your keys and you press F and it'll focus on the area that you want to focus on. Other tools that I'll show you today include resize the playback range, scrub animation, select a curve by holding M and clicking your curve, move multiple keyframes in time without changing attribute values. And you would do this by selecting keyframes and shift middle mouse button dragging left or right. So let's go ahead and look at this within the Maya file. Okay, here's the animation we're working with. Let me see, I think my settings might be off actually. And I just forgot where I needed to go, so give me one moment. Okay, so if I have play every frame on, it's going to look a little strange. You have to have 24 frames per second by 1, so that's under the time slider. So I'll save that. Yeah, now our ball bounce looks a little more natural. Before it was way too fast. So if you want to download this free ball rig that I'm using, I found it at Bloop Animation. If we break this animation down that I built, let's show the curves again. Because we want to select them so we can see the keys on the timeline here. So we have our squash at the beginning here, where it's hitting the ground. Then it moves quickly out of that position to a stretch. It continues to stretch until it hits the very peak of the animation, and then it comes back to its natural form. And then gravity starts to take effect, and our ball stretches again back to the bottom here, and then it squashes. And so that is our looping ball bounce here. When you're working with the legs rig for this week, make sure, I'm going to go in here, right click, cache playback preferences. Make sure cached playback is off, because that can give you a lot of problems with crashes. And I'll mention this again in one of our other lectures where we're going over the Mary rig. But make sure this is off at all times. It's basically saving all that information for you, and the calculating of that is making your file crash. If it's on when you have keys, it'll turn blue down here. So make sure, and you can go to cache playback preferences just to make sure that's off. So we're going to be looking at this looping ball animation back in our graph editor. I'm going to do the split screen for us so then you can continue to see what my graph editor is doing. Usually when I have 2 screens, I usually have my graph editor off to the side, because it just gives me more space to look at things and keep my animation open. There we go. I'm going to delete some of these random keys that I have here. When you begin to, I'm going to highlight these. So I don't know if you saw, I went into panels, saved layouts, and then I went into perspective graph. I didn't really say what I was doing, but you saw what it was happening there. So we have to have our curve selected in order to see that within the graph editor. And it looks like we only need these selected. Okay. So first we're going to go over pan in the graph editor, which is Alt, middle mouse button drag. So if, let's say we have post infinity turned on, which you can I can't see it in my toolbar right here, but I'm going to close. I'm just going to close out my outliner because I don't really need it anyway right now. So post infinity is right here, the second button in. I'm going to click that. You can also find that, you should also be able to find that within, yes, curves, post infinity, and then cycle. So this is continuing our curves on throughout over and over again. So if we extended our timeline but kept our keys where they're at, then it'll continue to loop. And that's an easy way for me to tell if you have your post infinity on, because we're going to be using that throughout your assignments, your cycles. So anyway, this is helpful when you, let's say you're focused on these last frames down here because you want to make sure that they're working properly, because you don't want this to have a slam into the next, if that makes sense. Sometimes when you set a key, it might be like this was just like that. The other side might be like that as well. So it's going to give you a hard hit. So the cycle will seem off. So you want to make sure that those are all good at the beginning and end for all of your curves when you're turning on post infinity. So now, to do the pan part, I'm hitting Alt, middle mouse button, dragging, and you can go all the way to the beginning, and you can see how that curve's looking. Okay, so that was the pan. Next we have zoom, and we would Alt, right click, drag. Wait. Sorry, Alt, yeah. I was clicking the wrong button. There you go. So Alt, right click, drag. And you can see how that can be helpful if your timeline is, you know, just keeps on going like that. Now, wherever you are at within the slider, I believe, nope, wherever you're wherever you're looking at, if you zoom in, it'll zoom in that area right in the middle there. So you'll want to know. Now let's see. Yeah. So no matter where you're at, just as long, wherever you're clicking, whatever's in the middle of your section here within the graph editor, that's where it'll zoom in on. The next one is zoom in on keys or curve. So you select the entire curve and click F, or select a few keys and click F. So if you notice, I selected all of those keys and clicked F, and it centered everything for us. So that's where all of our animation is, and so that's what's highlighting for us. Now you can also do that on a small section if you need to zoom in to see what's really happening in there. And now that I have that in the middle, if I wanted to zoom in with my Alt right, then I can really get into that section and clean it up however I need to clean it up. but you want to be careful with that because sometimes when you zoom in too close, it'll look like it's doing something that it's not, because sometimes it'll feel like it's like flat in the animation, but it's not. So you'll want to continue to see what's happening within your animation by zooming in on your perspective while you're working. So it'll tell you what's happening. So I do this, I use F a lot and just try to focus on some keys for you when I'm doing any of your lectures, just because I know that it's easier to see when they're close up. So I tell you a lot when I'm doing that as well. So for resizing the graph editor, let's see, we'll have to go to all the way back here. I'm gonna pan. All right. So this black tab here will resize your graph editor, and if you look at the bottom on the timeline, it's also resizing there. So it's just giving us a smaller section to view in our animation. So this can be helpful. So if I click this tab here, or button here on the timeline slider, that also moves it in, or you can move it in within these values. I'm going to pan over here so that we can continue to see this black tab. This is helpful when you're trying to see what's happening in a large, say your animation is a minute long or something like that, and you really want to just focus on what's happening at like the beginning or the end. You just want a little sliver of that animation. You want to really focus on it and understand what's happening. You can move that slider in, our time slider in. It still keeps everything else, but it allows you to see a little bit less, not only on those keys. So that can be helpful because you can really see these big keys and can really focus on them. And like if they're close together, it's not as confusing. But also it helps you to see the animation up here. Let me zoom out a little bit. So we would be focusing on the ball bouncing up. Is it doing what it needs to do? Do I like what it's doing? Do I need to focus on, making it a little different? Or I can do that now because I have a little bit less time that I'm focusing on. And then you can also select those keys and hit F, and it'll bring you back into those. So I'm going to go back out to where our animation ends. I'm going to highlight those for us. So let's see what we have next. Excuse me. Okay, so for the scrubbing the animation, because you only want to see it in slower motion, or just see what specific keys are doing, you would use this yellow bar, and that's your time slider, and you can just move back and forth to see what's happening. That's a great way to see what's happening in your curves specifically. You can also do that down here by just left clicking and dragging. So if you want to see if something's on an arc, it's really good to slow it down by doing this and see what's happening. So to select, let's say we only want to work on the offsets of this curve here, which is looks like it's our translate Y for. So this is our up and down of the ball. Let's double check that. Yep. So it's moving the ball up and down. So let's say that we want to move this and have offsets like we do in everything else. Instead of selecting all the keys, I can just hold M, left click on that curve, and it selects our curve for us. So that's great if we have everything selected and we just want to work on the offsets for this one curve. Then hit M or hold M, click your curve, and it only selects that one. So now we can go Shift middle mouse button drag, and we can change the offsets, or change the timing for that. So maybe we want it to happen sooner. We would go back in time for that, or to the left. If we want to happen later, we would go forward in time or to the right. I'm going to undo that. And we specifically add our offsets to our cycles just to add a little bit of, naturalness to our animation, because our bodies don't hit at exact moments. We have these secondary actions that are happening. For instance, our hip is leading us to the next position, and then our foot follows. So we're just adding a little more emphasis to make the walk cycle a little more interesting by adding those offsets. And it's a way for you to get more comfortable in the graph editor without having to figure it out on your own. I'm giving you ways, or a tool, so then you can actually play in the graph editor, but it's very specific things that I'm asking you to do. So we have move multiple keyframes in time without changing attribute values. We do this a lot when we're working on our cycles, especially when we're working on any of the offsets, as you saw. And we just did this with Shift middle mouse button dragging, and we did that left or right. So it's also important to have your values snapped when you're creating your poses, and you can do this by clicking the button with the magnet and horizontal orange bar here. So if this is off and we select all of these and we Shift middle mouse button drag, it might land on a time that's not a full keyframe, and then it makes it hard to animate these and get back to our actual key and alter these. So we want to undo that. We want to always have this magnet time snap on. And then when we do this again and we Shift middle mouse button drag, it's going to snap to a whole number, which is what we want. Because look, now we can, if you look at the timeline, we can actually work on these keys. We can move these and alter them. Before, we could have only done that in the graph editor. By also keeping our poses on the whole number and not on a decimal, we're denoting that those keyframes are important. Those are our contacts and our, those are important poses for us. Maybe you might change that just a sliver when it's something that's just kind of an extra action that's happening that's not as important. You might put it on a decimal in time, but it's seldom that you're going to do that, because most of your keys are there for a reason and you want them on a whole number within your timeline. So let's say that the values that we have are a little too extreme for our animation. So you can go in, let me hit hold M and click our curve. You can go into this value box. This is going to be the time one over here. And this is, the value for how, where it's at in the space, what that action is at in the space and what's happening, kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to hit divide by equals 2, and this will make our action less than it was. So before it was going up higher in the space there. Now it's a lot lower. So if I undo that, you can, whoops. Yeah, there we go. You can see that it was a lot higher. All right, it looks like you have a question. What about the second magnet icon? Is that one useful or needed? That one is snapping your values to a whole number. That might be useful in some cases, but I would say leave that one off because it's okay that our values are on a decimal. It's not okay when the time is on a decimal. So especially like just then when I did a divide by on our curve, it gave us more decimals. I would just say that it's not needed in our case. I haven't seen an area where you would need that. But I would leave that one off just because your values can be on a decimal. So, but I can show you what that looks like when we, let's say we want to move our keys up. So now you can see that it's, if we select this one, you can see that that whole number is there now, but we don't need that, so I'm undoing all of that. Whoops. Let me open that again because I didn't turn on enough undos. So it won't let me go back anymore. I might up that too, so then when we're just messing around, it's easier to get back to our animation. Let's see, live, there we go. I have a separate screen open where I'm opening our animation up. All right, so let's see what we have left. Okay, we have a few more things left to do in Maya. Not too many. But yeah, if you have any questions while we're going, that's perfect. That was a perfect example and allowed me to show you kind of a quick tip for that, which was great. All right, so now I can show you how to change how many saves you have as well. I don't know if they showed you this in another class. Let's see. I always forget where things are, so it takes me a little bit to get back to what we need. Cache playback, cameras, files probably. All right. This was off the cuff. So, that's probably why I can't find the undo. Oh, undo. Found it. All right. We'll just say, I'll just go 150. I don't know if it's still an issue, but when I was using Maya before, if you had infinite on it would be just a hassle. So that's why I'm just changing it to 150 for the undos. Also, another thing that's helpful, I don't know if I showed you in this class or in this assignment. You can enable autosave if you're having any issues with crashing and stuff. You want to save often. That's just something. Crashing in Maya is just a thing. So saving often is something that you'll learn to do on your own. But when I was in school, it was in person, and they would just shout out save at us. So I can't do that for you, but you can enable something that's kind of yelling at you on your own, which would be the autosave. And you can even prompt before save, and you can say how long the interval is going to be for your saves. So you could do 10 minutes, you could do 30 minutes. It just depends on what you want to work with. And then it'll give you a prompt that says save, which is helpful. So I'll save that. Well, I saved it. Let's hope that worked. Okay. So I need to turn on my curves again, and then I'm going to make it so then my selections are just the curves, because otherwise it'll select my geometry. And then we'll go back in here, delete those ones that aren't necessary. Okay, so you can also make your values more extreme if you want. And so if I go shift, oh wait, sorry. If I go M and then click our curve, it selects our curve again. We can multiply, and that will make them more extreme. So if we look at this now, it almost reaches the top of our perspective box there. So let's see what happens when we times equal 2. So we're multiplying by 2 our values here. So now you can see it goes completely out of our perspective window. That's, you know, where my focus is, because we made it more extreme. So it's going higher in the air on translate Y. So now you can do this, but since it's going higher in the air, oops. So it also took our ball off of 0. It's no longer hitting the ground. So you would have to fix that, and then you would also want to make your poses more extreme, because it's going higher and it's going to hit harder when it comes back down. So if you look at this, so I'm going to go 0 for here on the value to bring our key back down to where it needs to be. Oh wait, sorry, value here, 0. And then 0 on frame 1. There we go. Okay, and then that messes up our curve a little bit, and we would want to fix that. And that actually went through the ground. So we would want to make sure it is in the right spot. But yeah, it would be hitting the ground, obviously, and then you would want that to be more extreme. So let's see what we can do here. Yeah, I can make it squash even more because of how hard it's going to hit. And then it's also going to stretch more out of that pose. I'm shift middle mouse button dragging, and so it would stretch more because it has a lot more height, you know, so it would be a lot more stretchy. Okay. I'm going to undo that, so then we have our original animation back. There we go. Okay. Yep. So we'll do a value change within our walk cycle when I did the divide by equals 2. We're doing something similar to that when we're taking some of that hip movement out in X and Y. And I can show you that with a box, how that would look. So I'm going to go to Window, Animation, Outliner. I'm going to get this back up. I'm going to hide my ball animation so then I can just get that box. I'm going to go to Create, Polygon, Cube. I'm hitting F to focus on my cube here. Oh, I have geometry unselected, so I need to turn that on. I got this up past the grid here, and I'm gonna go to delete history. Wait, freeze transformations actually, and then we should be good. Okay. So now I'm gonna, let's see. I hit Shift W to key my translates at frame 25. I'm also gonna have the same key on 1 so we can loop this. Now on frame 13, I'm going to move it to the other side. I'm going to hit Shift W to get our keys. So we know that it's almost going to the opposite side of the grid. Let's see. Let's just do that. We'll try to make it go as far as possible here without getting off the grid. There. Now, if we go back into our save layout, perspective graph, and Shift M on that translate X, if we go to divide equals 2, you can see that it's going to be staying closer to the origin. It doesn't reach the end of the grid now. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're just making it so our hip movement isn't swaying so far side to side when we mess with the values here, as we just did. When we're doing the appealing walk, though, this might help if you're trying to make something a little more extreme. If you multiply your value, that might help you just see if that's going to help your animation. So let's go 4. I did multiply equals 4. So see how you can quickly get a different approach to your what's happening in your animation, and it only takes one undo to get back to the original animation. So that could be a helpful tool for you if you're just trying to push something and you want to make sure that it's working first. So like rotate X or something like that. And you just wanted to see how it's affecting, or if you can make it more extreme, or if you need less animation or less extreme values on it. All right, so now I'll show you the post infinity tool again, and kind of what I'm looking for. I kind of went over this earlier. I just turned that back on. You're going to make sure that all of your curves are cleaned up here on the first and the last keyframe, because you don't want anything to hit hard, like say like this. I don't want to see keys like this within your walk cycle, because it's going to add some snappiness when it loops. You want to make sure that they're cleaned up and looking like a natural curve there. I don't think I hit you as hard within the first week on that, but definitely within your appealing walk and run cycle, you should know by then, about cleaning up your curves, especially the first and the last one when you have post-infinity on. All right, so that's all I have for you in the Maya file. Let's go ahead and get back to our presentation. And these are the takeaways I have today. So this is what you're going to take a screenshot of, and you're going to include that within your 2.1 assignment, which is your live lecture assignment. And then you'll do the same thing where you're telling a takeaway that you had from this assignment or from this lecture. So the first one I have is get comfortable using the graph editor. I don't hit you too hard on all of the curves having to be smooth. I just want to make sure that you're looking at those first and last keyframes for the most part. If something seems really off when you get to your appealing walk, and I see that you didn't kind of look at that, I'm not going to dock you for it, but I'll go over why it should be altered. So mostly the first and the last keyframe is what I'm looking at and seeing that you took a notice to, but the offsets are the main ones within your graph editor that I will be able to see if you alter those as I told you to alter them. And definitely look at the rubric for each week within to see how I'm grading on the graph editor, because I tell you if I'm looking at like the foot animation, I'm looking at the offsets. I tell you how to I tell you exactly what I'm looking at within your rubric. If it's not in the rubric and I haven't gone over it, then I won't be talking on that. So get comfortable using the graph editor. The only way that you can do this is by continuing to practice using the graph editor. It will really make animating so much easier once you begin to understand what's happening in the graph editor. And there's so many useful tools, and the more you learn about it, you'll see that. So get familiar with the tools as you work. You can look back to these slides within this lecture or jump into the Maya help docs where you can search for answers that you need. So I'm going to move on in just a moment. Don't forget to take your screen capture here. All right, don't miss out on week 3 live lecture because I'll go over how to use the Mary rig. I'll show you how to add arm and hand animation, and I'll give you tips for how to use your reference video, and I'll even have a video that you can look at for your appealing walk. This is all I have for you tonight. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to Discord chat me, and I'll answer your questions as soon as I can. If you have any questions, Mave, right now, I can answer them within the chat there. Otherwise, we are finished for the evening. Okay. You know where to reach me if you do. So I will go ahead and end our lecture tonight, and I hope you have a great evening.